Hey, my name is Baayens. So who am I? Well, I've been public speaking for a long, long time. I found this here last year. Uh, I got a good work sweet smell of success award in grade 3, 1980 for public speaking. I scratched that grape thing and it smelled like grapes. That's 44 years later. I should smell it again, then I can say it's 45. So I'm a lifelong angling enthusiast. These are all caught are in the Rocky Mountain House area. And actually the pike that are there in the lower corner are from Sandy Lake, which is near Onaway, when it used to have water in it. Now it's just a big field. So there's some walleye, some pike, there's a bourbon in the middle there. And if you see on the right-hand side, there's a bull trout there in my hand when you used to be able to keep them. So mostly what I fished for around Rocky was brookies and bull trout. And they all got kept when I was little because mom always wanted fish. And I'm also a lifelong fish keeper. So that tropical fish hobbyist there that says 1983 edition. So I've been doing fish tanks and fishing for quite some time. Oh. Well, that's not going to be good. So my transitions don't work here. Yeah. So anyways, I'll just work with it. I grew up in Rocky Mountain House. The circle comes up and the little arrow points to Rocky Mountain House. And the area where I fished is basically that circle. So the upper North Saskatchewan, upper parts of the Red Deer, Baptiste, Nordegg. I spent tons of time out there. I grew up out there. We had trikes, which I hurt myself on quite a bit. We had dirt bikes. So we dirt bike and trike all over the place. And what I did when we went out camping was get out of the truck and I was gone. And I would be gone fishing the whole time. So I fished for basically everything. So you can see there's some mountain whitefish there. So I used worms. I fly fished when I was 12. I started fly fishing. And then, you know, I spent my whole childhood fishing out west of Rocky. And at the end of it, I didn't know if I wanted to be a rock star or a fish guy. So you can see in the one photo there. So hopefully my transitions will work better in the next ones. Oops. But what I decided that I wanted to do with the rest of my life was just work in fisheries or fish, one of the two or both, and do all the things that you could possibly do as long as it was related to water and fish. So I wanted to be a full-time fish geek. I went to school at Lethbridge Community College to be a fisheries technician, and I did really good in it and made most of my lifetime friends while I was there. And at the end of it, I got out of school and I worked for 5 months and then I got hurt really, really bad and ended up having a discectomy. And at the end of it, the neurosurgeon told me, "You're never going to be a fisheries technician. Forget about it. You need to go back to school to do something else." So I talked to WCB because I got hurt at work, right? And they based my retraining on the previous 3 years T4 earnings. So in the previous 3 years, I was in college and I only worked 4 months out of the year. So they told me that my earnings potential was to make $12,500 a year. And that's what they were willing to retrain me at. So I was totally screwed. And I just said, well, actually, I told them to F off. And I went to Calgary, right? And I had been volunteering with Trout Unlimited Canada with Don Anderson, Barry Mitchell, Michael, right? Tony Blake, all those guys out there. And they kind of put in a good word for me at Trout Unlimited Canada. So I also talked to Fish and Wildlife at the same time, and they said they would never hire me. They said, you can't do this job. You'll never be a fisheries technician. And so I didn't think I'd be able to do it, but I was, right? So it really, really hurt to get to the point where I could get up, move around. You can see I've got a backpack electrofisher on. They're 50 pounds. I'm not supposed to do that at all. That's on Quirk Creek with Jim Stauffer. And then in the middle there, doing some educational work with kids at the fish rescue. And then we had our big fish rescue. I think that one was in 1998. I think we had 500 people there. So I was able to be a fisheries technician and work on some of the coolest projects that are out there. How I got on the Quirk Creek project was the very first day. So the very first day that we were allowed to fish Quirk Creek and keep fish, I ended up, there was one guy from Calgary who caught more fish, but more of his fish were cutthroat trout. But I ended up catching the most brook trout. So dead brook trout don't tell lies, right? So Jim had me come on as the project coordinator, and I coordinated that for 3 or 4 years or something. The fish rescue, Brian Caroni at Trout Unlimited, who we actually got free rent in Alveden House on 7th and 7th in downtown Calgary. And Brian Caroni was the guy who arranged that. He's seen all these fish underneath a culvert on the Bow River Irrigation District Canal. And Kerry says to me, why don't you, and like, it was just a guy coming in, telling us, Brian, who we totally trust, right? He knew there was fish there. And he comes in, tells this to Kerry Bruin, and Kerry's like, Dean, why don't you go down there with Seamus and see if you can catch any fish out underneath that culvert, right? So Seamus and I went down there at 74. So we landed 74 rainbows in about an hour and a half. And I called up Kerry and I'm like, there is an absolute ton of fish here. You need to come down. And so that's how the fish rescue started. I did lots of fisheries conservation projects, worked on all the Trout Unlimited dinners. I worked with Wade here on the Edmonton dinner, would work on the Red Deer dinner, the Jumping Pound chapter dinner, did all of the TU national kind of stuff. We had to do it all because there was no staff at the office. We did the ecology and management of Northwest Salmonid's Bull Trout 2 conference, salmonid identification course with Fish and Wildlife. And I would also trade time with the Alberta Conservation Association. So when they had fun, cool places to go, they would take me along with them. So I got to do a lot of helicopter work. It was really cool. But during that whole time, I was still doing my fishing, right? So I was doing the fisheries technician stuff and just angling, right? So I wrote one article that was super popular in the Alberta Fishing Guide, the catatonic leaching, which is, changed over time. Now it's balanced leach, and people we call them go-tos. It's like a jig with just a leach body. They're awesome because they sink super fast. So you throw them out there, it's like putting a jig on underneath the bobber. It works great. That brown trout in the middle there is from Lock Creek. There was northern Dolly Varden, or no, Arctic char. No, it was northern Dolly Varden that had got into Lock Creek. And so under a research permit, I went with Kevin Egan and Brian Caroni. And we were angling the creek to catch northern Dolly Varden out of it, right? Because they'd escaped from this hatchery on Lock Creek. And I ended up catching this fish who hung out below the hatchery, probably eating hatchery fish that had gotten out of there. It was huge. It was probably, I don't know, anywhere between 16 and 18 pounds. This is gigantic. So Kyle McNeely, if you guys remember who Kyle was, he'd actually hooked it before, and they had electrofished that fish about 2 weeks prior, and it bottomed out their 5 kilo scale. So they couldn't get a weight on it. That's just a golden trout from Coral Lake. And so I also did a whole bunch of stuff with the Calgary Aquarium Society. My slides that come in one after another are not coming in, so it's not coming in the order that it's supposed to. But I did a lot of writing for the Aquarium Society. And every meeting I would bring in Corridorus Panda, which I bred at home, and everything was great. And I was doing like 3 different kinds of fisheries things. And then I ended up leaving Trout Unlimited and doing pipeline crossing assessments to finally make money, because I was putting in like 60 hours a week and not and getting paid on salary. And things had changed at Trout Unlimited and I needed to get out of there. And I did pipeline crossing assessments I worked for the ACA for 6 months and then pipeline crossing assessments for about 3 months, and just driving up and down the pipeline roads, my back totally gave up completely. And I was done again. I got seconded to the Fish and Wildlife Office, couldn't sit, couldn't stand. And eventually the WCB came in there and assessed me. And then after a whole long story of dealing with them, I had their lawyer come in and they apologized to me for not retraining me originally to do something that I could actually do. So now I'm doing something that I can actually do. So I'm a pharmacist. It's we're the good guys. At least Luke and Han are anyways. This is my friend Hugo and that's the Dean of Pharmacy, Dr. Pasuto. And now I'm a community pharmacist in Red Deer, and I help people with their medications. And I talk about fishing quite a bit too. And I still do like fishing articles, and it's the Brook Trout Glory one is a great article because that's about growing up in Rocky Mountain House. And Angling for Fun was about taking kids fishing, right? Because I got to do that too. That's a Cutoff Creek brown, super, that fish was super wired and super pretty. But I also do lots of fisheries conservation with the Alberta Fish and Game Association. Run the Friends of the Raven website. We still got $5,300 left to use for legal fees if we need to. If anybody wants to mine gravel at the top end of the Raven, which is ridiculous. And I've fought the good fight against the coal mining operations in southern Alberta too. So trying to raise awareness about that and how selenium would be a travesty to our waterways. And hopefully this is going to work. So I don't know if my videos are going to work on this. No, they're not. That is ugly. So this is Stainbrook Springs, and the video is actually super cool. Oh, nice. Okay, so have any of you been to Stainbrook Springs? Okay, so this is where the really cool springs are. If you go to the access point and you head to the east, it's about 1 kilometer on the south side. And so there's like a backwater, and it was actually Michael Dell and I put in like a bunch of habitat structures in there. There were like willow bundles that trout could hide out in. And so there's all these springs. This is in the springtime, and all these springs come up, and it's mesmerizing to watch. One of my very favorite places on earth to be at. It's really a unique feature on the landscape. And when I was a kid, I always thought that all streams had rock bottom, right? And I never fished east of Rocky at all, hardly ever, but we started fishing Clear Creek, which is basically the sister stream to the Raven. And I went to walk through something like this, and it looks like it's 6 inches deep. I walked through it, went down to my neck in this stuff because it's a big spring, right? It's not a rock bottom. It looks like it's shallow. And I have a pond in my backyard, which is taking up a ton of time. And then I've got tons of aquariums at home. I always have to keep busy. So now that I don't tie flies in the winter because it hurts my back too much, I have lots of aquariums. So I have 30 aquariums at home, and I keep and breed a whole bunch of different types of aquarium fishes, some of which are critically endangered. And that's been really fun. And I've met a whole bunch of people from around the world who do that sort of a thing. So it's just a kind of an expansion of, if you like fish, it's a bit of an expansion of the hobby. And then I've got to have a deck pond too, that I like. And now I need to try and get to the other presentation, but I need, oh, there we go. I'll just escape.
We have to start sharing again.
Oh, do we? Where do we do that?
Hit the okay on that first, get it off the screen. I think we have to get that on the screen back again. Just expand.
This one? Oh, share screen. Oh, here we
go. Down at the bottom there, the green arrow. Okay, pick your poison. And hit share. Oh, yeah, okay.
Okay, so we're cool.
Yep.
All right. Okay, so this is the meat of my presentation. Enough of, well, there's going to be lots more about me. And hopefully I can get the things to come in the right order. So when I was thinking of what to present to everybody up here, I thought about native salmonic conservation in central Alberta and what we need to do to build resilience within native salmonic populations. And so I want to start it off with a presentation from, I hope the sound works on this, or a video. Are they? So I might have to make it fairly loud. Let's start it again. Doesn't look like we have the greatest video on this, but it's not too bad. Has anybody ever seen that before? Do you guys know who Bob Behnke is?
No.
So he wrote the book Trout and Native Trout and Salmonids of North America. And Bob Behnke was instrumental in saving a whole bunch of different subspecies of cutthroat trout. So like Apache, Gila, and a lot of what he did with them was move them over barriers so that they didn't hybridize. So he really made a huge difference for native cutthroat in Western North America. So he came to our Bull Trout 2 conference proceedings, and Bob Behnke was the keynote speaker at the conference, and he wanted to fish the Bow River. And I was the lucky guy who got to fish with Bob Behnke. So this is me on the upper bow, and you can see I've got a bit of a mess going on here. So the one thing about the upper bow is that you have to be able to cast pretty far. And it's got kind of muddy banks along the sides and the middle sections of it to get into the deep water where the fish are. So Bob was there. He had his suit on from presenting. Kerry Bruin gave him like running shoes so that he didn't have to use his like dress shoes to go out and fish. And Bob and I went fishing on the upper bow. We went out there, it's a long cast. We cast it out to where it got deeper, where you see the edge for quite a while in one area. And there's just nothing doing. And I looked up ahead and there was like an island in the middle of the like upstream from us. And off of that island, there's this really deep shelf, right? And I was looking at it, right? And then Bob got to the other side of me because we're kind of working streamers along, moving up the river. And Bob got on the other side of me. I could see him. He'd be stripping in and looking at that deep water on the island on the other side. I had waders on, but I wasn't going out into the river because, I want to give Bob a chance to catch some fish. And so it was next to an island, so there was a bunch of like a side channel in between it. And I'm like, Bob, you should get on my back and I'll carry you across to the island, right? And he's like, no, he's like, that's okay. And I'm like, look at it. And he looked at it, and it's just this big, beautiful pocket right on the top end of the island, right? It's just super juicy for fish, right? And he looks at me and he goes, okay. So Bob gets on my back and I carry him across to the island. And after he gets on there, we start fishing and we're working, and he's a really good fisherman. Like he's good, right? And we work the crap out of that deep run in there. We never got anything, but it just like he just lit right up. And he started telling me all kinds of stories of cutthroat conservation and what they were doing in Colorado. And he was just turned into like a kid at the park telling me stories about, the conservation work that they're doing in Colorado. And so we finally gave up on the fishing. We ended up getting skunked, but on the drive home, we started talking about the work that he had done in Iran. So he got seconded by the Shah of Iran. So the US government wanted to set up trout fisheries in Iran so that they'd be like westernized. And so his duty was to get these trout fisheries going. So they had all these high mountain lakes, and one of them was just full of gammarous shrimp, right? So they stocked it with rainbows. They came back. So this is on the drive home. Bob's telling me this story and he's super excited about it. He's like, there's so much gammarous in there, you can nearly walk on them. So they stocked it with rainbows. They came back the next year, the helicopter that fished it, nothing, right? Came back the year after that, nothing. Then the third year, nothing. And then the fourth year they came back and they'd finally gone through enough gammarous that you could actually catch the fish. And he said they were absolute monsters. And they fought like the hardest fighting fish he'd ever fished for. And he was super excited about the lakes that they'd gotten done there. And we were just about back to Carrie's place because Bob was going to have like dinner at Carrie's house, and we were just parking out in front. And he said, but the native species that were there were really cool too. And he started talking about Aphanius fish. And he's like, but you wouldn't understand anything like that. And I'm like, no, I know exactly what that is. That's a little striped blue guy. And he's like, yeah, little striped blue. And he got super excited. And he's like, I got to go for dinner, right? So Dr. Benke was a fish nerd just like me. He liked fish, all kinds of fish, right? And what he was concerned was that he'd started these awesome rainbow trout fisheries, but maybe that was at expense of the native fish, right? So he was concerned about that. So what did we learn about Quirk Creek? So Quirk Creek was really about trying to remove brook trout, a non-native species, to enhance native trout species. So the takeaways from the Quirk Creek brook trout suppression project were that the catchability of native cutthroat and bull trout was much higher than brook trout, so they were way easier to catch. So you could have an impact with hooking mortality, which likely prevents the recovery of the native species, right? So you're trying to catch all the brook trout, but you're catching cutthroat and bull trout incidentally. And how many times do you catch those ones before that hooking mortality ends up, suppressing your efforts because you're just losing too many cutthroats and bulls? But the thing about that is that this is Quirk Creek. Did anyone here fish Quirk Creek? So Quirk Creek is like the Raven in the mountains. It's like flat water, super clear. The fish can see you everywhere. Like new people who would come out, they'd catch like two or three. If you were experienced doing it, you could catch more. So the easier fish to catch in that scenario, unless you're really experienced, are bull trout and cutthroat trout, which are more susceptible. And if you catch them too many times, eventually somebody's going to poke them in the eye or get them in the gill, right? So they're going to die. And so your hooking mortality could um, prevent a recovery of the native fish. But it's also a spring creek, so we never tried it anywhere else. We never tried it in a freestone stream where it's much easier to catch brook trout because everything is just trying to eat something as quick as they can, right? In the spring creek, you got time, there's lots of food, and if you're wary, you're going to be harder to catch. So we also identified that bull trout and brook trout hybridization was an issue. So some of the first hybrids that were identified in the province were from the Quirk Creek project because people would keep them. I kept one. I'm like, this fish looks different, right? And then when we went back and reprocessed it, Jim looked at it and he's like, I think that's a hybrid. So we ended up sending those ones off for genetic analysis. So there was, I think we had 6 or 8 out of the whole project, but either Jim or I would have to identify them. And the one thing that we learned from the project is that brook trout are highly resilient to angling pressure and really do represent a harvestable surplus. So if you have people that are educated enough to identify the fish properly, you could, have a harvest out there as long as you're not going to impact native populations too much. So the bottom line with brook trout is taking brook trout out of an ecosystem is like removing cream from the coffee. That's what Jim, said at the end of it. He's like, it's tough, right? Taking all the brook trout out. So it's tough to take cream out of the coffee. And a lot of people like cream in their coffee, right? Like I like fishing for brook trout. I don't want them to be completely gone altogether. So what I was thinking is that it's way easier to add sugar to your coffee than to take the cream out of it, right? So if you think of the native species as sugar, right, you can add more of those native species, make sure that you don't lose them altogether. So you're just adding something in instead of trying to remove something so that the native fish are do better. So now's the time. I don't know if you guys have seen this video before, but it's really awesome. This is what the government of Alberta is doing right now, and it works in well with what my ideas for the Upper North Saskatchewan are. Has anyone seen that before? No, it's awesome. Hey, so that's why I needed to. At least it worked that time. So really cool. So that's a great idea. So it's like instead of taking the cream out of the coffee, you add in the sugar, right? Which is the native species. So they're just starting that work in the Kananaskis to see how if it's going to work out, and they should be able to apply that to different streams. So when you look at our region here or in the North Saskatchewan, and we talk about adding sugar, I think about what would Bob Benke do? So he'd probably go for places that are where you're gonna get the most bang for the buck. If you look at the North Saskatchewan River, bull trout are the only native stream dwelling trout, and no matter what we do, they'll never return to pre-settlement levels. And there's a number of reasons for that. So bull trout has got the advantage. It's a really strong competitor in swift, cold streams and rivers. It's at the top of the aquatic food chain, so it sits right on the top. Nothing's going to eat it in the water. But it's really vulnerable to angling pressure. It's vulnerable to habitat degradation. It's vulnerable to hybridization with brook trout. And it's also, and probably one of its biggest vulnerabilities now is it's vulnerable to water heating. So the non-natives are strong competitors at higher temperatures. So brown trout, cutthroat trout, and rainbow trout. The non-natives are strong competitors at lower temperatures too. So brook trout and cutthroat trout are also pretty good at cold temperatures. There's another non-native that sits right at the very top of the food chain, and that's a brown trout. So it's like they can potentially displace bull trout as well, or at least occupy that. At least occupy that top of the food chain site. A number of the non-natives are resilient to angling pressure. So the brook and the brown trout are pretty resilient. And they're also resilient to habitat degradation. So brown trout are really resilient to that. So if you look at the entire watershed, right, there's only a small portion of the entire watershed where bull trout will dominate, no matter what you do, right? You can't get rid of the non-natives. You just have a small portion of them. So what you need to try and be able to do is increase bull trout numbers in the places where they're going to have the advantage, right? Because they're not going to have the advantage everywhere. Some places, just because of the habitat, brook trout are going to do better, or brown trout, or cutthroat trout, or rainbow trout. So you'll never really get them back to pre-settlement levels where they occupy habitats that are marginal, right? Where a bull trout, isn't the strongest species in that habitat. So I think about what Bob Behnke would do. I think he would get them over the barriers as quick as he could, because as time goes on, if you look at places like the Ram, the Clearwater, the Blackstone, you're starting to see brook trout dominate in some of those areas. So what you want to do is at least keep the species and those fragmented populations, at least a portion of them, pure. So I think you'd want to throw them over top of a barrier so that you didn't have any hybridization. Plus, getting them over top of those barriers are also at higher elevations, so the water is going to be colder. So they're going to, if the planet is warming up, the bull trout will survive longer in the coldest habitats. And you also want to get the most bang for your buck. So if you get bull trout above a barrier and they start reproducing, you're always going to have some fry that are going to migrate downstream and help to replenish those streams, right? So you have them established, and then you've got like a trickle down effect of recruitment to the lower reaches of streams. So the focus for the North Saskatchewan, what are the best options or the biggest wins? You got the Bighorn River above Crescent Falls. You've got the Siffler River above Siffler Falls, and then you've got the Ram River above the Chutes. So the Bighorn River, if you look at it, it's really easy street. It's got really excellent habitat. It's relatively large with spawning tributaries. You got one single access point, so you can kind of control poaching, any kind of poaching that's going on in there, and also understand what kind of angling is going to occur, or if you need to close the angling to get bull trout going, it's an easy place to enforce it. And it's not really a tremendously popular cutthroat fishery due to the inaccessibility of most of the stream above Crescent Falls. There's one access point. You got about, the average person will maybe walk 5 kilometers in a day, and you're walking over top of each other, right? So if one person goes up 5 kilometers and starts, then they've got fresh water, but it's just really got jam-packed in there. And it's a really tremendous opportunity for public education and engagement by enhancing pre-existing world-class infrastructure. So if you haven't been to Crescent Falls lately, they've got a huge viewing area now at the falls. So the cons are the genetically pure seed stock will be kind of difficult to acquire because we don't know where those are spawning right now. Access for the placement of egg capsules would be difficult, and the habitat isn't fully protected. So they've been talking about mining coal up there, which will probably never happen. That could potentially be logged, but it's not fully protected. So as their last September, what's that?
About 13 fish at that point.
Out of the right below the falls?
Yeah.
So this would be above the falls that we'd be putting them, but this is right from that new viewing deck that's gonna be going in there. And that's just a shot of the new deck. If you haven't been out there, it's actually really nice. They did a really nice job, and I was thinking that, you know, it would be an awesome spot to have like some interpretive signage or videos that you could check out while you're looking at the falls. And this is a cutthroat. So I probably went, I don't know, about 2 kilometers upstream from the very end of the campground and fished it, and it had been beaten up. Like I fished a lot, and cutthroat that are not getting pounded are usually in the middle of the pools. They're pretty easy to catch. These guys have been pounded, and so they were sitting in the toughest to cast into habitat that there was, all underneath willows, undercut banks. So they're relatively hard to catch, but decent fish. Like I got them up to 12 inches. I think the biggest cutthroat I've ever caught in the Bighorn has been about 16 inches or so. And the habitat looks pretty good. It's not a huge river, but I think that it would sustain bull trout in it. And the bug life was pretty good. I seen a nice, I think it's a green drake. It was in September though, so I don't know. Yeah. So that's the Bighorn. And then the Souffleur is got the highest level of protection. It should be a no-brainer. I'd imagine the province and Banff will eventually do this one. So you've got rainbow trout that are introduced in the Souffleur above the falls. And it's fully protected habitat. So it's in Banff National Park in the Souffleur Wilderness area. It's relatively large. It's got some decent spawning tributaries and Elizabeth Lake. So there's a lake also in there. It's permanently closed to angling. It's kind of a con too, because we don't get to fish it. Yeah, but it's a good opportunity for public education because there's the access point there, and there's a good ability to be able to put up some educational materials. Some of the cons are that the seed stock is going to be tough to find because we don't have any information on it right now. And the access for the placement of the egg capsules is going to be difficult because to get into Souffleur, you got to walk or go in with a helicopter. Oops. So this is what Souffleur Falls looks like. If you ever want a place to go in like February, January, March, go to Souffleur. So it sits in a rain shadow and you don't get nearly as much snow there. So you can walk up to the falls. So the only time I ever go up in there is in February usually, or March. So I never get any pictures of the waterfalls when there's no ice on them. But I have been in there in the summer. So it's a good barrier. And it's a pretty decent sized river. This is down in the canyon below the falls, but there's some pretty good flow there. So in winter, you get your lowest flows, and you've got some fairly good water in there. So the ram is kind of the holy grail for reintroducing bull trout into. It's really excellent habitat. It's a huge watershed with multiple streams and variable habitats. So you've got the bigger rivers, you've got the little tributaries where you get good spawning. And the genetically pure seed stock we know where it is. They're coming up Falls Creek. It's been studied. There's been all kinds of red surveys done on it. So the access for the placement of egg capsules would be super easy too, because you've got like the Joyce River, you've got Nice and Easy Creek, you've got Cripple Creek, you got Lynx Creek, you got all these different places where you could potentially put egg capsules. And there's a good opportunity for public education at the Ram Falls, but it's not as good as being along Highway 11. So there's not nearly as many people that get that far up the trunk road. So the cons, the habitat is not fully protected. There's lots of oil and gas. There's lots of forestry work in there, but those guys are not going to mess with the Ram River at all. They're generally going to follow the rules. But the main thing with it is that it's a tremendously popular non-native cutthroat trout fishery, and it needs to get a lot of support from anglers to be able to do it. So I had a big fight on the internet about putting bull trout into there already, right? So just kind of putting feelers out there, and people want that cutthroat fishery to remain the way that it is, because it's you can take kids there and they can do really good catching fish because it's easy, right? I would say the population in the North Ram is probably higher than what it needs to be. But if you look at the South Country, bull trout, cutthroat trout, they've grown up together. I expect that if you put bull trout in there, the cutthroat numbers are going to go down, but they're going to be bigger. So I think that from my perspective, that I'd be about 99.99% confident that if you put bull trout in there, it would just be a positive impact on the fishery. But there is this outside chance that the bulls just completely dominate and you lose that cutthroat fishery. There's that chance, but I would doubt it.
Why aren't there bulls there now?
They can't go over the chutes of the Ram. So where the South Ram and the North Ram meet, there's a falls, and we call it the chutes. They can't get above that. So the only fish that are above the falls, there's some suckers, but the only fish that are above the falls are cutthroat. And all the way up there, the north and the south, which is a huge watershed and would provide really, really supreme protection for bull trout. Because we've got the only population of bull trout spawning in the Ram, and probably one of the biggest one in the middle sections of the Ram is that Falls Creek population that's spawning in there. And those ones are vulnerable because there's brookies getting in there. So when I was a kid, I never caught a brookie up there, but probably for the last 15 years, I've been getting all kinds of brookies up there and browns too. So that population is at risk from hybridization. And it's like the middle North Saskatchewan needs bulls because you got the dam that provides a barrier there. And then you got the Bighorn where we could also get bull trout coming into it as well. So the Ram River is kind of the holy grail for native fish conservation. And that's Ram Falls. I'm sure you've all seen it. And this is what the South Ram, if you haven't been into the South Ram, you need to go if you can get in there. It is the coolest fishery in Alberta. Huge pools, cutthroats trying to eat other cutthroats. You can easily have 100 fish days there. And you get like the odd cutthroat that just becomes a predator, right? And it just starts eating other cutthroats. And that's the role that the bull trout would take over. So massive pools. This is one of my favorite holes in the river. And the hole where I seen the biggest cutthroat that I seen in that section anyways. And this is so there's a real importance in talking to the wildlife biology or fisheries biologists that are out there. So Falls Creek was, the bull trout were almost extirpated. Like the locals forgot that there was bull trout in there. I've never caught a bull trout in Falls Creek. There were none left in the early 90s. And then one of the guys who was working at the ACA started fishing Falls Creek. He just went in there and fished it. He started catching all these big bull trout. And then they started looking at it a bit closer and they're like, holy man, the bull trout have come back here. And they're starting to use this as a major spawning tributary. So we actually, before they closed it, this was the last year that it was open just before they closed it. We went in there and we were trying to get some of the fish that were had already tagged and getting the numbers off of them. But we didn't, which is good, we actually caught fish that weren't tagged. So that means there's more fish in there than what they thought. So this is a bull trout from Falls Creek, probably one of the last ones that was ever caught out of there. So thanks, that's the main part of my presentation. And now I get to talk about fishing if you guys like. I don't know how late you want to go, but we can talk about fishing for a little while. You want to talk about fishing? All right. Oh, so what did you think of that, guys? Is all right? All right, thanks. So I'm really glad that you guys were able to watch that video that was produced by Michael Short, because that was a really excellent video that they did, and I've really got high hopes for those egg pucks and being able to use them in different areas. So it's not just the rivers that I talked about here where there's barriers, but other places where a bull trout have been extirpated or their numbers are really low, or where they can get them into higher parts on the stream so that the native species can make a recovery. So I've got really high hopes for it. Hi, you had a question?
So that research program, when did they start it? Was it last year or?
I think it's a couple of years ago when they first started it.
How long do they expect to get?
I didn't have a chance to talk to Jessica at all to see how far they are along. But I would, yeah, no, totally, because and see if she can explain. I didn't want to steal any of her thunder because they've probably got more information out there for you guys with how successful those egg pucks have been. But I think there's no reason why they shouldn't work at all. They've been doing that sort of thing in BC for a long time. Anderson did it in some of the streams out west.
Well, they're talking about maybe using that same scenario with the railing in Denmark.
Yeah, and that would be great too. So there's a whole bunch of different opportunities for using that kind of technology because it's relatively cheap, right? Like if you look at what would it take to reintroduce bull trout into any of those three rivers that I was talking about over top of the falls, it may just be like one season of collecting eggs, right? Throw in the pucks, and then you got to monitor it. So maybe like a couple $100,000, maybe cheaper. I don't know. So it's not super expensive either because it's not really an intensive type of a restocking effort.
How do we find those spots? GPS or?
Yeah, they must have a GPS on them in the location. And I expect that they would, I think they were putting them down those tubes too when they put them into it. And I expect that they put them on the side, like have a location on the side or a GPS in the pucks. But I haven't talked to those guys to see exactly how they're doing it.
That'll find them.
Yeah. But I'm sure they have a way to find them. But I think that it'll be a really successful. It seems like a pretty straightforward, no-brainer kind of a way to get fish back into the system. You had a question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the fish stay in those pucks, is that the idea?
I think they hatch in them, and I don't know if they come out of the pucks or not, and if they monitor them with the electrofisher. Because I didn't find any more information on exactly how they do it.
Oh, it's holes 30 centimeters deep.
Yeah.
Is that what it said?
Yeah, so when fish hatch out, right? They could potentially, so they could have them so that they come out of those pucks, right? So they keep them where they're preserved. But I expect that that's the way that it's worked, that they're able to get out. Because if you look at trout when they're born in a stream, they go into all the interstitial spaces in between the rocks and they just find their way out. Like we found like on the lower belly, there's a part of it that goes dry between Montana and Alberta. And you'll be walking along the river and it's like dry, right? But you'll see little tiny pockets of water in there, and you'll see like little tiny trout sitting in them. So they get it all in between, and I expect that they just come out of those pucks. I don't know that I wouldn't think that they'd have to go back in and get them. And then they monitor by electrofishing the stream afterwards to see what kind of a success they've had with hatching. Yeah.
See what didn't hatch.
What's that? Yeah, and check out the puck and see what, died in it. Because those guys I think would be hatching in the spring sometime. Yeah. So that's about all I have for that part of the presentation anyways. I figured I would talk to you guys about that because I thought it was a super awesome idea. And if you're followed the Native Fish Initiative when it first started there, I think it was in 2016, there was a lot of arguing about what we should do. And I think that this idea that they have with the supplemental stocking and trying to get some of the fish over top of barriers is a really good way to keep us able to angle places and maintain native species at the same time instead of closing things, which everybody hates because they were going to close the ramp, right? And I'm like, why? It's good. But at some point that it might get to where they do need to close it. But if you can prevent that and keep fisheries going, that's the way to do it. And make everybody happy, right?
So, Deacon, what's the, I've never heard anything about the bull trout populations on the upper Red or the upper Saskatchewan.
Oh, they're good.
They're good?
Yeah, they're good. There's other, I didn't want to talk about I wanted to keep it to one system, right? So there's other opportunities for putting bull trout above falls in the Red Deer River system. And I personally fish a few of the Red Deer tributaries and they're good. And the upper North Saskatchewan is really good. Like the population is quite healthy because it's just super cold, right? So, and you've got that big river there that they can utilize. And so if you get big enough, right, you're going to do well. And the brookies don't compete as well in those main stem systems. So the bull trout really has an advantage when it's really cold and there's not a ton of food and you have to eat something. You have to have a big mouth to get as much in your gut as you possibly can when the opportunity arises. So the bull trout really do quite well. I actually fished it a couple of years ago and it was really good. Yeah, so I think that those populations are relative in pretty good shape. The places I worry about are the middle North Saskatchewan and the Clearwater, and the Clearwater especially, even though there is some pretty decent streams in it, but there's a ton of brook trout up there. And places like the James where there's also just a ton of brook trout. Yeah.
And when you put them above the falls, like crescent falls.
Yeah.
If you were to do that. What are the prey populations?
They'd be cutthroat.
They'd be
Right.
cutthroat
Yeah.
and whitefish?
No whitefish up
No
there.
whitefish.
No whitefish. So when you look at what the bull trout are going to be able to eat, so there's lots of resident populations that are out there. There's it's a tributary to the Clearwater just downstream from Cutoff Creek. The name is Rocky Creek. That population is kind of broken off from the rest of the stream. So that population of bull trout is primarily a resident population. So they mostly eat each other or bugs, right? So there's nothing much else up there. So they just will stay small, right? So in the Ram, and all three of those ones will have a prey population. So it'll be rainbows in the Souffleur and then cutthroats in the Bighorn and the Ram. And you could potentially have some pretty decent sized bull trout. I would think more so in the Ram than anywhere
And you
else.
think the cutthroat populations could sustain a reasonable bull trout population?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I would think
That's
so.
cold water and productivity is low.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that it'll equalize at some level, right? So the cutthroats would, do better potentially in any tributaries that are warmer, right? And they should be able to dominate. Like I would think that it would be pretty tough to knock out the cutthroat population in Nice and Easy Creek. Like they're densely populated. Like they're overpopulated in them. Like that's where I like to take kids is Nice and Easy Creek because it's got that bit of a silty murkiness to it. So they can't see you, right? And it's a perfect thing for a kid, right? Fish can't see you and there's tons of fish in it, but they're stunted because there's so many, right? So I think that they would do pretty good. Like main stem, you'd see less cutthroats, right? But they'd be bigger. So, which is fun. And you just kind of have to see how it turns out. Like that South Ram section, it's just big water. You're going to have lots of fish in it anyways, like cutthroats and bulls and potentially big bulls. You had a question?
The Torrens, are they native?
The cutthroats up there? No,
No.
those are introduced. Those
I thought
guys.
maybe you would have, because they stopped above the falls there, so I'm just wondering if the cuts there are,
No, they wouldn't have gotten anywhere north of the Bow River system. So they were never in the Red Deer or the North Saskatchewan. We got just bulls in Red Deer and North Saskatchewan. But and then cut south of those and anywhere north in Alberta, they were stocked. But yeah, super cool. I'm super excited about the opportunity to expand the bull trout's population because when I was a kid, we near wiped them out. Like I would go to like some of those little tributaries and I'd sit on top of a hole and there'd be like 6 or 8 bull trout in it and 10 or 12 brookies. I catch all the bull trout out of it, like all of them, right? Because they were the bigger ones, right? And they just could not resist a worm, right? Like the brookies would get scared and not come back and bite. The bull trout would just, they had to have it, right? So I feel guilty because I'm partly responsible for wiping out bull trout in Western Central Alberta on my own, like in different little, and so what I would target when I was a kid, I had a dirt bike and any of those floodplain spring tributaries on the Clearwater would have all kinds of bull trout in them when I was young, right? And I'd go in there and whack and stack, right? You're allowed to keep 10. I didn't know, that was the limit, right? So mom always wanted fish. So yeah, it's my guilt is why I had to present today. So you guys want to hear about some fishing?
Yeah.
And so maybe some tropical fish too. So I'll start off with some tropical fish. Okay, so this is Melanitania Gary Langi. So it's named after a guy. And the Calgary Aquarium Society brought him to Alberta. So he mostly looks for new species in New Guinea, and he does a lot of writing and education. And I was able to take him out, no pressure, in April to see our native bull trout in the wild. So I went out to Cutoff Creek because that was the only place I figured that you'd be able to actually see one because the water is clear. And it wouldn't be subject to runoff at all. And I had some really good spots where you can see fish. One of the spots that I call the aquarium because it's like about 8 feet deep and you can see to the bottom, super easy to get around. And there's a bridge, and then there's a couple of other holes on the creek. So we drove 4 hours from Calgary to see a native bull trout, right? So he's never seen our provincial fish before, and he's like an international fish guy, right? So we want to show him our fish, right? Our provincial fish. We go to the first bridge where I usually, like I would say 50% of this time I see a bull trout under it. No. And then so we go up to the aquarium and that's like almost a guarantee, like 95% of the time I've seen a bull trout in that hole, like almost every single time. And we go through it and then I'm like, oh my God, we're done here, right? So we're walking along the creek and I'm like, the kids have seen, and we're with another guy, Curtis. We're like, the kids have seen a bull. Last time I was here, the kids seen a bull trout through this stretch. It's just above the aquarium hole. And Curtis is there. He's like that one over there. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Look, and there's like a 24, 25-inch bull trout sitting on the other side of the stream against, not under the undercut, but close to it, right? So Gary he's excited, right? He gets out his camera and he's trying to take pictures and the sun is just super bright, right? And he's getting all kinds of reflection and he's like trying to adjust all the adjustments that he can on the camera, but he can't get a perfect shot, right? So we do this for about 10 minutes. And I say, you know what? I'm gonna go over there. I have my fly rod and a bugger so that any fish that we seen underneath the undercuts, I could try and move them out so we could get pictures of them. So I went over to the other side. I put a bugger in front of this big bull and it just does nothing, right? It just doesn't even care. And I'm like, well, he's not moving, guys. Like, I'm gonna try and just like reel up my streamer, put it on the rod, and then I'm just going to kind of poke it with the end of the rod and see if it'll move into, like, scoot into the middle of the stream, right? So I poke it with the end of my rod and it just lays there. And so I'm like, I'm gonna poke it a bit harder. So I ended up pushing this bull trout with the end of my fly rod out into the middle of the stream into the absolute perfect light. Gary got a ton of pictures. They got some video. And then I went over to the other side and got my own video. Yeah, I pushed him right over. I was like, where's the best spot where you just poke him along until he went there. So it was super cool. And it was just the most perfect, after a 4-hour drive for Gary to get there, it was kind of just the perfect scenario. After that was like probably 1 o'clock in the afternoon, we had lunch. And then, mission accomplished. And then we went to another hole that I know, and there was a bunch of bowls in it, like 3 or 4 that were sitting in there. The water wasn't nearly as clean. And then on the way out, I was telling him all about bears and how he needed to have bear spray. And then just on our way out of around Corkscrew Mountain, we seen bears, right? 2 cubs and a sow. And so he got to see everything that day. So it turned out super awesome. So I've also been doing lots of writing too. So this I had published in Amazonas magazine, breeding Corridorus garryi. So I also do fish nerd stuff.
Do you have a tag of discus?
No, I don't. I have blue eyes, goodeids. I have a whole bunch of different fish, but not discus. Discus are fairly tricky to keep. Oh, this is a cool story. So I had my hip replaced in 2023 because I've had nerve damage in my left leg thanks to WCB. I've had that over the years, and I have to stand on my right leg. So apparently you can't stand on your right leg for 20 years without wearing out your hip. So I wore out my hip, had to get my hip replaced. And then when I was good enough, of course I got to go fishing, right? So I'm like, okay, I'm going to the Blackstone then, because I want to go to Blackstone. So I go to the Blackstone and go down, the Husky High Road off the Forster Trunk, and you go down to that bridge at the end of it, right? So I'm like, I haven't got a lot of kilometers in me, right? I've just had my hip replaced. This is the first big trip. So I go there, I start walking on the riprap, almost fall in and bust my hip again. It's bad. But I caught bull trout right away, right? So, and then I moved upstream in the very first pool that you can see from the road there. I caught a cutthroat, and it was a nice cutthroat, like probably 16, 17 inches on a dry. It was awesome. I caught a few more bull trout. Then I come back down the bridge. The green drake hatch started, and I caught like 12 or 13 bull trout. And I got thinking, it started getting rainy out, and the road can get kind of muddy. So I was like, oh, we should get out of here. And then I was like, hey, I've got a bull trout and a cutthroat. I should see if I can get like all 5 species today, like on my first big trip back with my hip being replaced. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to Shunda, right? And I'll get a brookie out of the top end, and then I'll hit like East Nordic Trout Pond and see if I can get a rainbow. And then the bridge at Harlech, there's always fish rising under there, and there's always browns. Like I'm going to get a brown there for sure. So I go to Shunda Creek. This is the place that I've driven over like a bajillion times on the trunk road. There's awesome brook trout fishing right there. I ended up catching 30 in about an hour and a half, and they were nice. And so I got my brook trout right away, and was super excited. And then I'm like, oh man, this rainbow is going to be hard to get, right? Because East Nordic Trout Pond is not always good. And I fished it. I was thinking I was going to get skunked, and I seen a fish rise. And I'm like, okay, there's fish at least in here. And then the next cast, boom, I got one with the leech. So I got my rainbow. So all I needed to get my 5 fish in one day for my comeback tour is this brown, which is like the easiest fish out of them all, because I know there's tons of them rising under that Harlech bridge. So go down there, sure enough, there's a brown, and he's close to the shore, and he's downstream from the bridge, and he's going hard, like super hard. And he's on my side. It's a super easy cast, and I cast it out there. He takes it right away. I stick him. It's about a 12-incher. I start bringing it in. I get kind of lazy, right? Because I'm like, I'm the best. I've got my 5 species, and I freaking lose him. Like he gets caught in the weeds at the bottom. I lose him, and I only have 2 hours to do it because we have to be back in Red Deer. And so I just struggled and missed all these dinky fish. And finally, after when I had only like 15 minutes left on my, because I had to get my wife, we had to pick up kids and stuff like that. And I finally got like this 6-inch brown. You know, if you've been to Shunda Creek, there's an OHV bridge that they've put in there. And there's a really big hole below it. It's on the, I guess it'd be the south side of where the Harlech Bridge is. And there's a bridge there for OHVs, and there's a big hole below it. And I got this 6-inch brown below there. I'm like, oh, that's kind of weak. So I was like going to use up my time to try and get another one that was a bit bigger so I could, it's a better story. And I did. I got one that was maybe about 9 inches. But it was an awesome day. So I got all 5 species on my comeback tour from getting my hip replaced. And those are illustrations by Carl Geis. And then I just want to talk about, so has anybody here been up to the Blackstone Gap? Okay, so you know where this is, right? This is the start of the gap. So if you get above this really tight part, you get into that big meadow that's up there. And we were up here a few years ago. And so one of the really important things about getting bull trout conserved is the last time I went in here, it was so full of hybrids, it is ridiculous. And I'm like one of the few people in the province that can identify them accurately. I would say that 1/3 of the fish that we caught were hybrids. So it's like, we need to be able to get on some of this species conservation up here, because places like the Blackstone are in trouble. Like if you look at, so where I went last fall, the last place that I fished last, it was in October. It was a really nice day in October. Was Lookout Creek, which is a tributary to the Blackstone. It comes in near the campground there. And I walked up from where the bridge over Lookout Creek is just before you get to the Blackstone campground. Walked upstream from there. There's brookies spawning everywhere. And but I did catch bull trout mixed in between there. So the brookies are just populating that river. Right, so it's in a bit of trouble from just brook trout, and maybe we can use and it makes me angry every time I'm out there and I can't whack a brookie, right? Because if I'm catching them anyways, I might as well take them out. But there's good bull trout out west, so most of what we do now is going to places that are hard to get into and fish if we can find big fish, we will try and catch those guys. So we're looking for bigger fish in remote areas. So there's still big bull trout out there, right? So there's some populations that are doing quite well. This bull here is about 32 inches that Shane's got, so over 10 pounds. So this particular day we caught 40 bulls and we caught 3 over 30 inches and probably 10 or 14 over 24, and then a bunch of little guys and a bunch of cutthroats too. So there's still systems where they're doing pretty well, right? But don't want to announce where they aren't. And then the Raven. So I know Don says that the Raven is not as good as what it was, but that's because what we did all those years ago when the Raven was in bad shape and all that fencing was done, all the restoration was done, we're really starting to reap the benefits of it now. So those fish aren't all in the top end. They've moved down. Now all those degraded habitats have improved. So you've got huge browns all the way down to the red deer, right? So like where we used to always just fish the upper parts because there'd be all kinds of pikes and beaver dams and stuff in between, like after the Stauffer Bridge. There'd be all kinds of beaver dams, lots of habitat degradation. Most of that habitat is cleaned right up, right? And that river has responded astronomically. So we have huge days for big browns on it. It's super good. It's super good. And a lot of it you can access through the ACA's fencing program, like, or access program. So it's really good. They're just tough, right? So they didn't get big by being stupid. So it's not like you're gonna get 20 fish in a day. You might get like 5 or 6, but they're gonna be over 20 inches, right? So there's lots of fish in there, but they're big and not as numerous as what you'd see in the top end of it, where we used to have to fish all the time because that's the only place there was lots of fish. But now they're all through the whole thing, all the way down to the red deer. So the Raven River has been a huge success. And some of the land that I'm able to fish on is private, right? So that doesn't see a lot of angling pressure. So you get a lot, also more fish into those areas as well too. So this is just one spring. This day was probably the best day I've ever had of fishing on the Raven. It was in May, rainy day, and they were on. Like, didn't matter what you threw at them, they were on. Like every fish in the river was on. They were like jumping over themselves to grab your hook. And then so more remote type places. So if you look around, look at maps, look at like Blackstone Ram, other upper red deer has still got cutthroats in it, right? So look around, find places that are pretty remote, bigger water. And you can find fish like this. This is a 25-inch cutthroat. So this guy here, I actually wrote about it. It was in an article by in Barry Mitchell's Alberta Fishing Guide. This cutthroat was eating whitefish. It's like, so I was hooking whitefish, he'd come and eat the whitefish. And I thought that I would eventually, like I was maybe not reeling in my whitefish as quick as I possibly could have, and I was trying to catch smaller whitefish. But I ended up getting him on what I was using to try and catch whitefish, a little prince sniff. It's like a 14. I don't know why. I almost landed him with the whitefish. So the first time that I hooked him, I'd hooked a small whitefish and he ate it. And I almost brought him into shore with that whitefish. But that was the best fight I've ever had out of a cutthroat. I stuck him and it was like, it just didn't move. And yeah, took a long time to bring him in. And then he just bolted downstream out of the pool. It was a super cool fish. But we'd walked, I don't know, 9 kilometers one way. Like it was, we'd walked forever that day. We found a buffalo skull. So we were remote, but super good fish. And then like side channels, so you get some huge guys. So if you're spending time on the red deer, some of the side channels are good in there. Same with the North Saskatchewan, Clearwater. So getting into some of those places that just don't see a lot of anglers, right? So it's not the main stem of the river, but off to the side, looks like frog water, right? But you get in there at the right time, usually before dark, you'll start to see big browns moving around. That was a good, I think that one was like 25 or 26 inches, it was big. And then I spent a lot of time with Dave and Amelia when they were still living in Red Deer. And those guys are just spectacular anglers, super fun to fish with. And they that's what they do too, is just go and try and find new places, right? To fish. So I took that picture on probably one of the best days of fishing that I've ever had. Out west, just Dave and Amelia had found a good spot and they took me out there and it was dry browns on dry flies all day around that size, like 16, 17 inches up to 20, but really, really fun water to fish and super good people. This is the only thing I took from Trout Unlimited. Just a picture. That was my keepsake from Trout Unlimited. When I seen it on the wall when I got there, I just started laughing. And I put it in my desk. So that's everything I got. Thanks, guys. That was fun. I'm at the Johnstone IDA. So it's been good. Like pharmacy is good. It's something that I can do. Like my injury is pretty severe. So if I pick up something at the wrong angle, it can put me down for a week at a time. But I've done pretty well the last 8 or 9 years or so. But it's fun. I still get to fish tons. So my schedule is better now.
And so Dane, pick one, which one fish, what species would you go for?
To fish for?
You could only choose one.
If I could only choose one and that was all I could choose for the rest of my life, I'd fish for brook trout.
Brook trout.
Yeah, and the reason for that is that I'm not like every other, or well, I'm not like your average kind of angler. What I look for when I catch fish is I want to see the fish and I want to see how pretty it is.
Yeah.
And there is no fish that is prettier than a brook trout and variable, right? Like rainbows will all kind of look the same, right? Brown trout look different, but they're not as pretty, right? So I like brook trout because they're the prettiest fish by far. And they can look so different, right? Like you get some that are just jet black. Like we cut some out of Lawrence Creek, which is a tributary to the the Baptiste this past fall. They were pre-spawn and there were males that were jet black, like they were black, really cool with like really bright red spots. Like you couldn't even see the blue on them. They were so black. So that's kind of what I fish for. I like seeing beautiful fish.
How do you find new waters? Is it just experience or like I use Google Maps?
Google Maps, look for a canyon. Look for a canyon, look for big bends, right? So I found on the red deer, I found like the most amazing hole that I would have never fished if I hadn't been messing around with Google Maps. And just because it's like on its own, right? So there's not like a whole bunch of good looking water around there, but it's a big hole. And it was kind of, flat and straight in the immediate area around it. So you had to like go to that hole. And so I went to that hole. I'm like, this looks awesome. And I was like, oh man, it slid in. Like there was a mudslide in it, but there was still lots of water there. And I ended up just doing ridiculously good on pike and walleye, big walleye. I think I got one that was like 28 inches, pike that were like 15 pounds, but I got 10 or 12 of them, one after the other. It was good. But so looking at Google Maps, looking for canyons, looking for places that are far away, right? That to get to, anywhere remote, but also look for the things. But it can be anywhere. Just go to a place that you've never been to, like that spot I found on Shunda. I've driven over that like 100 times. I just never stopped there because there's always somebody camping there, right? But as soon as I got in there, if you're a good angler, you can look at the habitat and go, this is good. This is really good. So what's so good about that section is that it's undercut and it's got the perfect grade, right? So it's just like pool, riffle, pool, riffle, pool, riffle. It just, and on and easy to cast. This is just an awesome section of creeks. So you can find those kinds of sections everywhere. There's a part on Stony Creek that's ridiculously awesome. And the whole like 3 kilometers on either side of it is garbage, right? There's no fish, there's hardly any fish in it, hardly any habitat, nowhere to hold. But there's one little section and it's about, I don't know, maybe 800 meters long where it's just like pool, riffle, pool, riffle, pool, riffle, and there's all kinds of fish in it. But it'll happen on any of the streams out west potentially. So you've always just like, always talk about put in your time, always try and go to someplace new and like say, go back to your special places that you really like, that you found that are awesome, but just trying new spots. Seeing lots of sinuous in streams, because then you're always going to get like that pool riffle So when you look on Google Maps, it's a good way to find good reaches, right? And grades, right? So whenever there's a creek coming, when a creek comes out of the mountains and it goes into a flat, and then it'll go into the canyon, you'll get like this kind of a hump, and it'll slow it up, and you get all kinds of undercut banks and stuff like that. So it slows down, like it's a grade change, right? So you'll get like deeper habitats and you get more fish in it. Then you'll hit that grade going down and that'll be garbage, right? And then you might get into a canyon where it flattens out again, and then you get big pools again. So it's just kind of looking for those types of areas, especially the ones where they come out of the mountains into the flat. And then it's like it slows down and then you get better habitat in the area. It's like if you look at Quirk Creek, that's exactly what it is. It comes as those springs come out, you got a low gradient and lots of undercut banks and habitat. Then it hits that grade down to the river, and that's garbage. It's just like I've sent all kinds of people down there for Quirk and nobody catches anything because there's no habitat. Yeah. Fun stuff. I'll never get sick of fishing out west. It's awesome. It's I've spent a lifetime doing it. Good seeing you. Thanks for coming out. Any more questions or question?
I just want to say something on the Panther River, just talking about
The Panther.
finding stuff.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
I've referenced similar to Google Maps, but this is on the Panther, and you're talking about this stuff.
Oh, yeah, that's good. So
Okay.
like right in there, right in there. So if you find like, so what you want to avoid is those straits.
Yeah.
Right? So the more that sinuousness that you can find, the better it's going to be, because you're always going to have that variable habitat, right? So the pool, riffle, riffle.
Gotcha.
And so kind of target that, and then you might say, okay, I'm okay with walking a kilometer through garbage to hit the next one, right? Or you might just target that one spot and then go to a different spot later in the day, right? Where you know it's potentially gonna be good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's all I really kind of do. It's,
We're on the right path.
yeah,
Appreciate it.
no problem. Well, it's fun, guys. Thanks for letting me talk for so long.
Thanks, Dean, very much. A little token here for the new
Oh, hey,
freshwater
awesome.
conservation. It's a really nice local art cards.
Oh,
They were done by a fella here in town,
It's awesome.
and
Thank you
yeah,
so much.
nice cards. And also, we can, Dean's got your, you guys can go, let him know what your gas cost is, and we can help you with that.
No, don't worry about it.